what the league really needs is a commissioner.
I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect.
But you're going to open yourself up to potential legal action until you clarify what the hell is going on.
I think it's only fair I get a chance to play with some of my queens here in the twilight of my career.
I would personally bet anything that we will not have this commissioner next year.
This morning, a 6'10" former NBA center sat down at a desk in front of a painting of George Washington and filmed himself signing a letter to the commissioner of the WNBA. Then he posted it with the caption, "Rules are rules." He wanted the league to confirm that they received his draft application. He's 34 years old. He hasn't played in the NBA in 4 years, and he is the second former NBA player to declare for the WNBA draft in the last 72 hours. The other one is on a ballot on Tuesday for the United States Senate, and I promise you that detail matters more than anything else for this video. But here's the part that actually got my attention though. The people who run women's basketball have been asked one question over and over repeatedly for 3 straight weeks. It's a simple question. It's one sentence long. Reporters have asked it. Outlets have asked it in writing. Their own players have basically asked it. And the league's official response, as of Monday, is a private memo scheduling more meetings. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why they won't answer it and why the silence might be the smartest and most expensive decision that this league has ever made. But to get there, we have to go back 3 weeks to one paragraph in one article that started every bit of this. Now, before we get to the content, we have officially hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. I wanted to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. This is my 3rd YouTube channel that I was able to get to 100,000 subscribers. A lot of you guys followed me over here from Flight Mic and Microphone, and I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so supportive of every venture that I make. I'm truly blessed to have you guys behind me, and all of you guys are my motivation throughout the sleepless nights, throughout all the sacrifices I make to make this content for you guys, and why we go so hard and take our job so seriously to bring you guys the greatest news with the best research, with a team of, in my opinion, the most gifted editors. To celebrate, I'm giving away multiple copies of Grand Theft Auto 6 to subscribers that turn on their notifications on this channel. Let's grind towards 200,000 subscribers, and now that we got all that out of the way, let's get to today's video. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? So back on July 21st, ESPN.com published a long profile on Sophie Cunningham. Now, if you don't follow the WNBA, Sophie plays for the Indiana Fever, right next to Caitlin Clark, and over the last 2 seasons, she's become one of the most popular players in the league. The profile covered her whole rise, but buried inside of it was one answer about one topic, and the answer is the reason everything else in this video happened. And here's the detail that people missed. The interview wasn't new, guys. ESPN actually talked to her back in February and March. That quote sat in a drawer for 5 months before the article dropped in the middle of the season. She didn't pick the timing, the machine did. In the piece, Sophie Cunningham brought up a political issue she felt qualified to speak on: protecting women's sports. And here's the full quote because context matters on this one. She said, "I got a lot of negative feedback about me hating trans, and I'm like, I never once said that. I think that I am here to extend love, but I also think with that love is truth, being honest, and I want to protect young girls in a locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men." That's it. That's the paragraph. 2 days later, reporters asked her about it before a game, and she didn't back off on this take at all. She said, "I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense, and I stand on what I said." What happened next was a 3-week arms race. On one side, JD Vance praised her on Fox.
Sometimes when you're courageous in this country, some of the worst people in the world try to attack you. What I would tell Sophie and anybody else is keep speaking your mind. You actually are inspiring a dozen people.
J.K. Rowling, Riley Gaines, Martina Navratilova, and even the White House came out in support. Stephen A. Smith said that she was 1,000% right.
What if an NBA player decided to transition to playing in the WNBA? How elite would they be? How great would they be? We gotta put stuff in its proper perspective and call it like it is.
He said that 2 weeks ago, and you must remember that because it's about to be very ironic very soon. On the other side, her own coach, Stephanie White, said exclusion is never the answer. Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve showed up to a game against the Indiana Fever wearing a Trans Kids Belong shirt. Valkyries coach Natalie Nakase backed inclusion. Golden State's Gabby Williams said she'd welcome a trans athlete on her team or against her team anytime. Seattle's Stephanie Dolson wore a trans rights are human rights shirt when the Storm played Indiana. And outside Fever games, actual rallies started showing up in both directions. People with signs in parking lots over a paragraph in a profile. It got personal too. Sophie Cunningham got booed in Minnesota.
Got it deflected by Potch. Here is Cunningham. Oblak circling right into hand. Free safety. Boston, Cunningham.
A minority owner of the Seattle Storm got suspended by the league after she allegedly called 2 teenage Cunningham fans effing insane. And then came the most surprising voice of all, Sophie's podcast co-host. If you didn't know, Sophie Cunningham hosts a show called Show Me Something with Wes Wilson, the summer house guy from Bravo. Now, these two aren't just colleagues. They grew up together in Columbia, Missouri. They played high school football together. 4 days after the ESPN piece, Wes posted a TikTok disagreeing with his childhood best friend in public.
Okay, transgender athletes in American sports is such a borderline non-existent issue that right-wingers have convinced a massive portion of people in our country that these people are like a threat to sports in America, when like mathematically that's not the case at all. And by continuing to platform this, fucking politicians, athletes, journalists, news outlets, you're only isolating transgender people even more by making them seem like this giant group of people is a threat to society and threat to sports, when that's just not proportionately the truth in any capacity. There is like 10 transgender athletes in all of the NCAA. And so I think there are unique questions that can be handled on individual bases, but to allow this to take our attention away from like housing and healthcare and wars and all the other actual harmful shit in our country is dumb.
He never named Sophie. She never responded. He never said another word about it. There was no feud, no blow up, and no canceled podcast. Just 2 childhood friends on opposite sides. Hold on to that, because the way the media cover that tells you everything about where this story goes next. Now, one more piece of context so the rest of this makes sense. 27 states, including Indiana, have laws restricting trans athletes and girls in women's sports. And the Supreme Court upheld 2 of those laws in June. So the temperature in this country was already at a boil. And into that boiling pot walked a 6'3" center from Monaco who never asked to be in this story at all. Her name is Julie Tétart. She's 34 years old, 6'3", and she plays center for Monaco in France's second division, a league called LF2. She came out as transgender back in 2021, and this past season, she put up numbers that got the entire basketball internet talking. 21 points and 20 rebounds a game. She led the league in both. In March, she grabbed 30 boards in a single game, which shattered the league record. The old record was 25. Those clips went viral right in the middle of the Cunningham storm, and fans, mostly American fans, started tagging the WNBA under them. So a reporter from Outkick, which is Fox's own sports site, slid into her Instagram DMs and asked if she'd ever play in the WNBA. Her answer might be the most humble thing you'll ever read in a sports story all year long. She said, "If they contact me, I won't say no, but you have to be realistic. I'm old, and there are far better players than me." She called it a childhood dream, the same as any girl who grew up playing, and then said the quiet part herself. It's probably not possible. When they asked if the WNBA was inclusive, she answered, "The league is, yes, but the country, no, haha." That's the whole exchange. A DM, an honest answer, and a laugh. But what the internet decided to do with this exchange was something else entirely. Outkick's founder, Clay Travis, blasted the league as transphobic for not signing her. A former NFL player tweeted at the Minnesota Lynx demanding that they put their money where their mouth is. A years-old Donald Trump joke about LeBron James transitioning started recirculating.
I'd be the greatest women's basketball coach in history, because I don't like LeBron James. But I'd go up to LeBron James, it doesn't matter. I'd say, "LeBron, did you ever have any desire to be a woman?"
And Forbes reported that Tétart, a second division player in France who answered one DM, spent days as a lightning rod for abuse on X. Now, I wanted you guys to be clear of something. No transgender player has ever played in the WNBA. Not one in 3 decades of the league existing. So this entire war is over a hypothetical. And here's what I need you to also pay attention to. Throughout all of this, Outkick actually did something genuinely useful. They asked the WNBA and the Players Union one simple question: would Julie Tétart even be eligible to play? Neither one answered. They followed up and still nothing. Remember that non-answer because 2 former NBA players were watching this whole thing unfold, and one of them had been telegraphing his next move for 3 years. So on Friday morning, August 7th, Enes Kanter Freedom, an 11-year NBA veteran, 6'10" and 250 pounds in his playing days, posts a video on on X. He's in a WNBA hoodie, sitting at a desk like it's a press conference. He reads a statement that was very clearly written by somebody who's been waiting for this moment his entire life.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA.
He says his team studied the league rules on self-identification and inclusion, and he insists in the video that he's definitely not here to mock anyone.
My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027. I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices.
Whatever you think of this move, understand that this was not an impulse. Back in 2023, Cantor tweeted, "Since I'm blackballed from the NBA, should I put on a wig, identify as a woman, and start dominating in the WNBA?" That was 3 years ago. This bid has been sitting in his drafts longer than some franchises keep head coaches. The post detonated 50 million views by the time I'm recording this video, and immediately the internet split into two completely different sides. On one side, Riley Gaines called the move genius and perfect and joked about which team would recruit him. On the other side, Mediaite ran the headline, "Ex-NBA player in his Cantor freedom declares for the WNBA in latest anti-trans stunt." The same man, the same video, same 24 hours, two completely different universes. Keep that in your head because we're gonna come back to it. Because 6 hours later, the story found its second character, and this one is even crazier than the first. Royce White. If that name rings a bell, there's a reason. White was a first-round pick, 16th overall by the Houston Rockets in the 2012 NBA draft.
The Houston Rockets select Royce White.
He famously battled a serious anxiety disorder and a fear of flying, clashed with the team over how it was handled, and ended up playing a grand total of 3 NBA games, all with Sacramento. Since then, he's been a Big 3 player, a podcaster, and this is the most important part, a politician. He ran for Congress in 2022 and lost the primary. He was Minnesota's Republican nominee for Senate in 2024 and lost as well. And right now, he's running for Senate again for Minnesota's open seat. Now, the interesting part about this was Royce White wasn't able to play in the NBA because of an anxiety disorder, primarily his fear of flying. Now, I don't know if he's over that now, but if he was to get into the WNBA, he's gonna have to fly again, and he was making way more money before when he was in the NBA. If he was to presumably get drafted to the WNBA, he'd make a fraction of what he would have made in the NBA.
I realized my fear of flying really wasn't a fear of flying. It was the transgender trapped inside of me, caged inside of me, that gave me an aversion to small spaces. I think there are plenty of people out there who have
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
A transgender trapped deep down inside of them.
Now, Friday afternoon, hours after Cantor's video, White went on Fox and said this.
I'm transgender. I'm a woman. I identify as sometimes identifying as a woman for purposes of basketball, professional basketball. So I'll be declaring for the WNBA draft in 2027 as well. I think I'd be unstoppable. But I'm a team first guy. I'm a pass first kind of player. I do the little things.
He literally posted about this days earlier, writing on X that I identify as a sometimes identifying transgender woman. My wig is in the mail. When the backlash rolled in, he posted again. I haven't even been publicly trans for 72 hours, and I'm already getting so much hate. I just want to hoop with my girls in my feminine era. He told reporters that the only thing that would stop him is the league making a definitive statement that males can't play, arguing the league should actually want the two of them for ratings, and floating that this could open the door for other NBA guys, even someone like LeBron James. But Sunday is also when he said the thing that matters the most for this story, saying, "I never thought I was a woman. I've always trusted the science." So if you run that back, the man is telling on himself. He's pretty much telling the whole world that this is a bit. I don't have to characterize this move for you because he's doing it on a microphone. Now, there are also 4 things you need to take into consideration here. One is Minnesota's Republican Senate primary is on Tuesday. The second thing is it's an open seat. There are 9 Republicans running, and this is Royce's 3rd campaign in 5 years. The frontrunner in his primary is Michelle Michelle Tafoya, the former NBC sideline reporter who was photographed a week before the vote wearing a shirt supporting protesters who oppose transgender women competing in women's sports. And finally, keep in mind, Royce made his announcement 4 days before that primary, attached to the biggest sports story in the country. Now, I'm not going to tell you what all 4 of these facts add up to. That's what my comment section is for. The reaction from inside the basketball world was, well, not gentle. Former NBA big man Robin Lopez spent 16 years in the NBA, and he said, "I can't imagine anybody who wants Enes Kanter or Royce White around them for even 4 minutes. We've seen this illustrated whenever Enes is near Turkey or Royce comes close to logic or reality." Meanwhile, Donald Trump Jr. went the other direction and predicted Enes breaks every record in the WNBA in year 1. Everybody on the internet picked a lane, except the one organization whose job it was to pick a lane. Let's zoom out, because the weekend itself became the story. For 48 hours, this was the top trending topic in sports on the planet, and depending on which half of the internet you lived on, you saw 2 completely different events. On one side, this was the biggest troll in sports history, all victory laps and exclusives, and the famous Michael Scott video that wrote jokes itself.
I declare bankruptcy!
On the other side, this was pretty much 2 washed former players hijacking a women's league for attention. And there's one viral reply that's very true. Trans women have never played in the WNBA, so why is this being treated like an existing problem in the league? My favorite part as a guy who covers media for a living is that almost nobody in the loudest 48 hours of this conflict stopped to ask one simple question. Does declaring for the WNBA draft even do anything? Because it doesn't. There's no portal. There's no form Enes filled out that dropped him into a draft pool. A public declaration has no procedural standing under the league's rules. The draft has its own eligibility process, and a tweet has never been a part of it. Kanter literally had to write a letter to the commissioner this morning and ask her to confirm that the league received his application, because no mechanism exists for any of this. The whole thing runs on vibes, about 50 million views worth of vibes. And remember Wes Wilson, the co-host? Watch how the machine handled him. A guy respectfully disagreed with his childhood best friend in a 53-second TikTok. The headlines called it a split, a rift. Co-hosts at odds. Nobody fought. Nobody quit. As far as anyone has reported, the podcast is completely fine. But 2 friends who simply disagree politically doesn't drive clicks. So the machine printed a feud that doesn't exist. That's the whole ecosystem that this whole story lives inside. And honestly, it's the reason why this YouTube channel exists, so we could consistently bring you the truth. Which brings us to Friday afternoon, and the moment that the most important person in this story finally talked. Well, kind of. While Kanter's videos was doing numbers on Friday, Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner of the WNBA, did respond. She didn't hold a press conference and she didn't post a statement, but she sent an internal memo to the teams, which the Associated Press got a hold of, and ESPN later obtained a fuller version.
There was a memo from the WNBA commissioner that was sent out saying that a task force that's made up of groups, presidents and general managers, they're going to meet next week to discuss the issue, as there are growing questions about whether the league needs to clarify that eligibility and update it, Bill.
Here's what it says. I know many of you have received questions in recent weeks regarding transgender athlete participation in women's basketball, and I expect this topic will continue to receive significant attention. She calls it a complex and nuanced topic. She promises listening sessions for team leaders. She thanks everybody for handling media questions with thoughtfulness and professionalism. Do you notice what's missing? An answer. The memo never says yes, but it also never says no. It doesn't even mention Enes Kanter or Royce White. But 2 lines in this memo are doing all of the heavy lifting here, and I want to slow down on them. Line 1 is eligibility rules. Unlike the eligibility rules of some other leagues and governing bodies, are collectively bargained. The translation for regular people is the league is saying it can't answer on its own, because who counts as eligible is written into a labor contract with the players union, and changing a labor contract means negotiating. The second line is a task force of team presidents and general managers is taking this up this week. So the official plan in writing is just meetings. What about the union? The Players Association put out its own statement on Friday, and the wording here matters a lot, guys. So here's most of it. The WNBA represents 200 plus individual people with different lived experiences, cultures, lifestyles, and opinions. We embrace justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are the values that unite this union and allow it to protect women's sports while creating transformational change. Hate, abuse, and demonization representation of any person or group of people, including transgender people, only fuel fear, division, and harm. We will continue to have hard conversations, but we will not be used as political pawns. It's a strong statement, genuinely, but read it again though. It protects women's sports and embraces inclusion in the same breath, and it never touches the eligibility question. Both halves of the internet claimed it as a win for their side, which tells you that they answered nothing here. Compare that to how other sports handled the exact same question. You can agree or disagree with their answers, but they gave one. Women's tennis went to genetic testing. USA Fencing wrote a female at birth rule for its women's events. The Olympics rebuilt its framework around biological sex. Different sports, different answers, and every one of them is written down. The WNBA's paper says one sentence. Article 13 of the collective bargaining agreement. Only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA, but it doesn't define the word. It doesn't establish that self-declaration counts, and it doesn't say how a claim would ever get challenged. And the anti-discrimination language, which is Article 34, sits right next to it. The gap between those two articles of a labor contract is the exact space that this whole circus is performing in. So let's run the scoreboard. Reporters asked the question for 3 weeks. No answer. Outkick asked it in writing about a specific player. No answer and no reply to the follow-up. People magazine asked after Cantor declared. No answer. 2 guys declared for the draft specifically to force an answer, and what they got back was a memo about listening sessions. And that's why Bill Simmons said this about Kathy Engelbert.
Nobody needs a commissioner more than the WNBA right now. The WNBA, which is for some reason turned into the Twitter For You page as a league, and meanwhile has all of these amazing stories going on. The league's like legitimately fun to watch, and yet all anyone talks about is dumb shit. Anyone who participates in the shitty discourse about the league, like, I think that speaks more about them than the league. But what the league really needs is a commissioner.
So why won't they answer? Well, here's my honest read, and once I tell you it, it's very difficult to unsee it. Every possible answer costs this league something enormous. If you say biological women only, the league picks a fight with its own players union, with the coaches who wore the shirts, and with a huge chunk of the fan base and sponsor class that built the WNBA's identity around inclusion. If you say trans women are eligible, the league walks into a buzzsaw of national politics. 27 state laws, a Supreme Court that just weighed in, and every troll with a jersey and a dream. There is no answer that doesn't cost them, so the institution did what institutions do when every door gets expensive. They just didn't take a side. And look, as a strategy, this is completely rational. It might even be legally required, since eligibility genuinely does have to be bargained with the union. But here's the cost nobody at the league office will tell you. The silence is the oxygen. Cantor's stunt only works because there's no written answer for it to crash into. The moment a real policy exists in either direction, this circus loses its tent. 3 weeks of trending topics, 2 draft declarations, 1 letter signed in front of a George Washington painting, and all of it lived inside a vacuum the league chose to leave open. So here's my prediction, and I want yours in the comments. I don't think the WNBA puts a written eligibility definition on paper before the 2027 draft. I think the task force meets, the listening sessions listen, and the league runs out the clock, because every week without an answer is cheaper for them than any week with one. If I end up wrong, it'll be because of a lawsuit that forced their hand, not because of a press conference. That's my call. Am I wrong, or do they cave and define it? Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.